Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Law Chat, the monthly series of chats with luminaries from the legal services sector or people who've got insights and inspiration to offer people in the legal services sector. Today, as with previous editions, this is brought to you in conjunction with Moore Markham's accountants and business advisors specialising in offering financial services to the legal profession. Now today, my guest is not a lawyer. I'm delighted to say I'm being joined by Monique Rhodes from her home in Queenstown here in New Zealand. Monique is fascinating because she's had an amazing career. She is an expert in how to live a happier life. She's turned her life around in many ways. She became a professional musician. She traveled the world. She opened concerts for Chuck Berry in 2007 and 2008. She's produced 2 platinum albums here in New Zealand. She's worked with the Dalai Lama and she's been nominated for New Zealander of the Year. And here today, she's going to talk to us about the secret to happiness. Monique, hi and welcome to Law Chat.
It's nice to be here with you, Simon.
And thank you for coming on. I'd hoped, of course, to be able to meet you in person last month at the Future Firm Forum, which inevitably was postponed because of the COVID lockdown. So I look forward to seeing you on the 4th of March now. That's the rearranged date for any listeners who might be thinking of coming down to Queenstown for the forum. You'll be able to meet Monique in person because she's going to give a talk expanding on some of the issues that we're going to chat over today. So I very much look forward to that. But happiness, it's an interesting topic. In fact, before we came on today, Monique, I've got hanging up in our house this little poster which I wanted to show you here and the rest of the viewers. I hope you can see that. What do you think of that?
I think that there's a lot of things that are attributed to the Buddha. I often think, gosh, did he really say that? And how free we are in attributing things to him. You know, even of course overseas you have the Buddha bars and stuff. I often think what would the Christians say if they were Jesus bars that people were going as nightclubs and partying up in. So that's my first thing. But I love it that, you know, that wisdom's out there. But what would the Buddha say in those days about what success is as well, you know?
Indeed. I'm sure in those days it was very different from what it is today.
Probably having a square meal in India at the time. I've spent a lot of time in the areas that the Buddha lived in India. And I think, actually being able to have enough food to eat would probably have been seen as a huge success in those days.
Absolutely. So listen, tell us more about your life, because these days you're no longer technically a professional musician, but you very much focus on helping people build a happier life. How did you come to reach that point in your life?
Well, you know, I grew up in New Zealand. I was adopted at the age of 10 days old up in Auckland, and then was brought down to the south of New Zealand to Dunedin, where I grew up there. And didn't have the easiest time growing up. There's no doubt about that. It was difficult. And by the time that I reached probably my teenage years, I think it would be fair to say that I was quite depressed. And at the age of 19, I got myself into a place where I couldn't really see a way forward. So I ended up in hospital having taken an overdose, trying to take my own life. And I remember being in the hospital and really thinking through this question of, why is it that I'm finding things so unbelievably difficult? And why is it that there appear to be some people in the world that kind of cruise through life and find it a lot easier? And I really wanted to understand whether it was something that was like my genetic makeup, was it from things that had happened to me? And was there a way for me to be able to shift that? And so that really became my mission. I went on a mission for years. I've traveled all over the world, studying different philosophies, seeing how different people live all over the world to try and understand, is it possible to shift your happiness levels? Are they something that are movable, or are they something that are really stagnant? And you know, what I found is that they are something that's movable. And I've completely turned my life around, as you can probably tell. And this is what I now have ended up teaching, is teaching people how to shift their happiness levels so that they don't have to be stuck, um, in a life that they're not happy in, and that it's really possible to move this. And I think it becomes more and more relevant with COVID happening, because even before COVID, the World Health Organization had said that by 2030, depression would be the biggest health problem worldwide, like surpassing obesity. So I think that we have to really look seriously at the moment at what are we doing wrong, and what is it that we can do to support ourselves so that we don't end up as one of those statistics. A friend of mine was at a talk last night here in Queenstown where the statistic was given to her that 1 in 5 people in New Zealand have a mental health problem. That is big. That is really problematic. And I think the more high pressure the jobs we're in, the more susceptible we can become to ending up as one of those statistics.
Well, the stats for the legal profession, as you probably know, the legal services industry generally aren't that great. And indeed, in this country, it's been described as creating a cultural crisis. Indeed, when I wrote my first book 20 years ago, I think lawyers featured second in the league table of professions for the highest incidence of the highest incidence of depression, I beg your pardon. So, and recently, further global surveys indicate that that statistic is still valid. So there's an awful lot of work to be done. Now, I understand you do work with lawyers, and how have they received your interventions, your input, and in the sense of making them happier?
Well, it's interesting because they have a tendency to be a little bit, I guess the legal industry attracts a lot of A-type personalities. And that can be hard to get them across the line to starting to see, well, actually, you might think it's really good to go to the gym, but equally, it's just as smart to work with your mind. And to get them to the understanding that the mind is actually the ordering principle of your happiness or your suffering can be really hard, because A-type personalities are very success-driven and have a tendency to want to plow through things with huge capacity without really understanding that that can end up taking a huge toll on them. And in fact, usually I don't usually live here in New Zealand. I usually live in the United States. And I have a lawyer there who's become a very dear friend of mine, and she was my immigration lawyer for the United States. And when I was working with her, when I was finished working with her, we weren't actually friends or anything, but when I was done and we'd got all my business visa all sorted and everything, I went to her a couple of weeks after we'd stopped working and said, Lauren, we've worked so intensively on this for 7 months. Are you missing me? And she laughed, and I tried for months and months and months to try and just get her to do a basic meditation program that I teach, and I couldn't. And she laughed and she said, I'm actually missing you so much, and have been so inspired by what you're capable of doing that I've started doing your program, the 10-Minute Mind. And it was really funny because she was a month in and she had gone to a meetup with a bunch of her friends who are lawyers, but who've known her for a long, long time. And when they saw her 30 days into the program, they said to her, I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, we want it as well. So they all ended up signing up to the program too. And I think the biggest thing for her was starting to realize that she needed to take care of her mind in order to be able to be the most beneficial in her work. And that this incredible ability and capacity to do so much, which you often see in lawyers, is wonderful, but without balance, it can become very, very problematic.
It's interesting and very relevant and timely, I think, that we're speaking today, because as some of our viewers may know, and I alluded to it last month in our chat, that I've conducted a couple of law firm welfare surveys this year on the back of COVID, just to assess how firms are doing and what the mood is in the camp. And each of those last 2 surveys have indicated that firms are very busy. There's a hell of a lot of work around. There is huge demands being placed on their time. Productivity is generally up, but it's come at some cost, and that cost is to the quality of their working life. 26% of people in the last survey said their working life, quality of their working life had deteriorated. 60% said it was about the same, and only 14% said it had improved. So that's not a very encouraging statistic, is it?
Probably not. It would appear as though there's a slippery slope happening.
So obviously the causes behind this can come to some extent from the demand that's placed on people's shoulders. But from what you've just been saying, Monique, it's how people respond. It's not just what happens to them, it's what they do about it that can be a significant influence in the happiness factor. So given the fact that so many lawyers are busy, that's a given, yet so many respond in different ways. What sort of ideas or tips can you share with us and our listeners in terms of what they could do if they find themselves really struggling?
Well, I think that we live in a world that's very success focused, and there's so much of our self-belief that our value in the world is actually decided by our levels of success. And I think it's really important, if we want to be successful, to really understand, what does success look like? Is success, something that I can measure financially? Is success something that I can measure, by how far I get ahead in my career? And without an understanding of what success actually looks like for ourselves, we can end up, going above and beyond what success could have been without even realizing that we've achieved it. So I think that's a really important thing, first of all, is to see what is enough. What does enough look like? And then when we look at success, to see, is success just work focused and orientated, or actually what are the successes that I can have in my own life? Does that mean a successful marriage? Does that mean being a successful parent? Does that mean being a successful friend? And all of those things, and what does that look like? Because I think that we really have this, imbalance in our life. And the imbalance is that on a lot of levels, we've mastered, often, unfortunately, at the cost of the environment, but we've mastered, our external world. There's so much that as human beings we're able to do that is just mind-blowing from even 100 years ago. But what we haven't mastered is our internal world. And so that imbalance is becoming more and more prevalent and more obvious to us as we are able to achieve all sorts of extraordinary things, and yet our internal world is suffering immensely. So I think that we have to really look at what that balance is, Simon, and really ask ourselves the question of, if I'm giving out so much, how do I fill my well back up? It's really vital. And I work with CEOs in all sorts of industries. And one of the biggest things that we have to look at is, how is it that you actually take care of yourself and look after yourself? Because it is unsustainable to be working ridiculous hours and having no boundaries and expect to almost keep taking water from a well without filling it back up again. And if we can start to actually look at ways to give back to ourselves, what we find is we actually are able to have all that energy that we want to have to give back into the workplace. But not only that, to give to our partners and our children and our families and our friends. And I think it's really important. And COVID has highlighted this, particularly with people working so much from home as well. The boundaries are so blurred between work life and home life.
Yes. And tell me, are you finding that the people that you referred to, be they CEOs or, and this is a general question, not just aimed at the legal profession, but in terms of the people who come to you at the moment, have you found that there is an uptake, more receptivity to opening up, to dealing with this inner dialogue that people may be wrestling with?
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of that reason, Simon, is that people are at a level of desperation a lot of the time at the moment. So if I was to say the biggest issue that I come up against with people who are CEOs or running big businesses is overwhelm. Overwhelm is like its own pandemic at the moment, where people are trying to manage working from home, they're trying to manage family life, they're trying to manage the amount of clients that they have. and at the same time trying to manage themselves. And so there are lots of cycles that get easily fallen into. Like a perfect example is maybe someone's working from home and they have a really, really busy work day, and then at the end of the day they want to give some time to their kids or their partner or a member of their family, and then at the end of the day they feel like there's been nothing for themselves, nothing for them. So they fall down, the rabbit hole that so many people do, which is to just jump online and start scrolling before they know it. It's late, they've been scrolling, they don't feel better about themselves, they don't get enough sleep due to it, they wake up in the morning and they start the whole process again on reduced sleep, which is then creating its own set of issues and problems. So I feel that people are scrambling to try and manage things, whereas perhaps there was a little bit more of an ability to go to an office and have that separation. And without really good boundaries between work life and home life, it can feel as though the work life is bleeding into the home life, and maybe the home life is bleeding into the work life. And there's kind of no ability for real rest. So one of the biggest things that I have to get firms to do, but also individuals to do, is start to create some really, really clear boundaries in their life. It's the most powerful thing that you can do. And the most powerful thing you can do for your employees as well is allow them to have those boundaries, particularly at this time.
That sounds like very good advice, because it's been my experience. I think there are a lot of leaders out there who have employees who go the extra mile to make sure that their employees are okay, and that comes at some personal cost. I've spoken to several this year who've said that they do feel overwhelmed, that COVID has taken a bit of a toll. So in terms of setting boundaries, are there any sort of specifics that you can suggest in terms of whether it's closing the computer or leaving the office at a given time, or saying, look, I'm not available? What do you think works best?
I mean, one of the problems that you have is that there's a lot of competition in the workspace. So everyone's trying to prove to their employers that they're really, really valuable, and I'll work above and beyond, to do this. We see this all the time. So I guess a lot of it comes from the culture that you create in your firm. I think that's a really important thing. So in my company with my employees, the culture is you actually get in trouble if you're working above and beyond, unless there's a really, really good reason for you to do it. So the culture that is created, and it's from the top down for me, is that do your work, do a really good job, but I want you taking holidays. I want the weekends to be off unless you're working on the weekends looking after the clients. And working overtime is not something that is celebrated. Because I really understand that the more that my staff are able to have downtime, the more they're going to come into work really excited about what they're doing. They're going to look after my clients better. They're going to be happier. So I'll get more productivity from them that way. So that's the first thing, is from a firm's point of view, if they can encourage that and not encourage competition in the way that overwork is seen as one of the indicators of someone, doing really well in your office. And then from a personal point of view, if that kind of culture is in place, without a doubt, I'm a big fan of time blocking, so that you would get really clear about what your day looks like, and when you've either achieved a certain amount of hours or you've achieved, the goals that you want to within certain time blocks, that you then would say, at this time, I've planned my day. These are the things I'm going to achieve. I'm going to do my absolute best to get there. I'm going to time block all these different activities around it. And at a certain time, or when certain priorities are completed, it's over and the computer's shut. Now, I would probably be seen as extreme in the world, even though to me it is the most logical thing. But when I close the computer, you can't get hold of me unless it's absolutely urgent. I have no email on my phone. There's no way. So if my staff need to get hold of me urgently, they can send a text message. it's not a problem. But otherwise, I'm out of bounds unless, the house is on fire, because there's no need to. And if I can have my downtime at the end of the day, where my day's finished and I can do some nice things for myself, I can go hiking, I can get out on the lake, whatever it is, then I'm going to come back tomorrow so rejuvenated, so well, and much more productive in my working space than I would be if I had allowed email and notifications and messages to drip into my downtime. It's almost, Simon, like our nervous systems never have the opportunity to turn off. And I see this a lot, particularly in the States, where you'll be out to dinner with, people, and they're just on their phone through dinner dealing with things, particularly, in LA, where a lot of people are working in production and stuff and in the film and TV industry. And it's just so unhealthy. And they just are becoming, they're struggling more and more. So I think it's a very important thing for us to, hopefully as an organization, see this. You will have staff that are working so much better and so much more productively in a shorter amount of times, as of course in New Zealand the 4-day working week experiment has shown. And on top of it, from taking that responsibility from an employee and knowing that I'm working in an environment that encourages this, and I will take this time because I know that if I gift it to myself and give it to myself, I'm going to be nicer to my partner, I'm going to be nicer to my kids, I'm going to live a happier life, and I will be more successful all round because of this.
Yes. Good insights there. And I wanted to ask you too, last night, I think you said you were out last night at a function, was that right? But I was glued to the TV last night here in New Zealand watching Adele performing at Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, an area of the world that you know very well. Yes. And in between various tracks, she was being interviewed about her change in life over the last 3 years. And I found it very inspiring. But she reached a stage in her life where she addressed her own unhappiness and decided to take steps to actually turn her life around. That's not just an issue of weight loss, but it was an issue of relationship breakup, figuring out who she really was, and finding a place in the world where she felt good about herself. It led me to wonder how far people have to go before they are alert to the warning signals. What's been your experience on that? Because obviously if people don't recognize them and they become totally desperate, then we end up with suicides and all sorts of stuff happening.
I mean, I think it's always interesting when we ask ourselves these questions of, how happy am I? Because I think that people have a tendency to overestimate their happiness. I have a course called the Happiness Baseline, which is an 8-week course, and I teach people how to shift their happiness levels. And what we do at the beginning is we do the Penn State University happiness inventory. And it can be really powerful for people to answer a series of questions and actually see where they are in terms of their happiness. And a lot of the time I get people who start this course who see where, it's a scale between 0 and 5, and they see where they land on it, and they're quite shocked, they're quite surprised. The wonderful thing is then to, be able to shift their happiness over these 8 weeks and show them what's possible. But I also think that for a lot of people, there's a kind of low-grade depression or level of anxiety that's constantly sitting with them that they're not really aware of. So doing something like the Penn State University Happiness Inventory can be a really powerful way just to get an initial gauge on how happy am I really. But I also think, Simon, that Adele's a really interesting example. I've just been listening to her album, and where we have this kind of situation in the world where we think that, if we have lots of money, if we have lots of success, if we have lots of power, as someone like Adele does, that we will be happy. I think it's really shocking for us to perhaps reach the levels of wealth that we're hoping for, or maybe reach the levels of power or the levels of success that we have believed will align with happiness, and to get there and to actually realize, like Adele has, like so many celebrities have, that happiness does not equate with those things. And I think this can be a really important thing for us to realize, because I often look at it as, I call it as soon as happiness. You know, as soon as I've got this job, or as soon as I've got this car or this house, or as soon as I'm making this amount of money, that I'll be happy. When we actually reach it, we realize that the thrill might only be momentary, or it might be short. It might run maybe for a few months or 6 months or a year at the most, and then all of a sudden this dissatisfaction starts to kick in again, and we have to start looking for what is the next thing that's going to give me this feeling of happiness. And we then become like, you know, the rat on the wheel. We just keep going round and round. It's a very Sisyphusian, you know, kind of exercise. So it's important for us to look at whatever our job is, whether we're a lawyer, whether we're a teacher, whether we're, you know, a cleaner. It doesn't matter. It's that whole question of what is enough and what does success look like, and to have a real understanding that the things that truly make us happy in our life aren't often anything to do with money. Like right at this moment, I'm looking out my window, and there is on a tree there is a beautiful tui that comes and visits me often, you know, during the day. And I'm just looking out at the window at him now and seeing him there. And now there's 2 of them. I can't even tell you how much joy just looking out the window and seeing 2 beautiful tuis brings me. It costs me nothing. You know, it's right there. It's something unexpected in front of me. And I think it's good for us to start to look and track. You know, I have this joy journal that I go to every night, and I just write down the things that bring me joy. I've done it for years. And when I look at what are the things that bring me joy, they're usually playing with my 4-year-old niece, who I enjoy, hanging out with my dog, being out in nature, spending really quality time with a friend. Those are the sort of things that truly lift my mood and make me really full of joy, which is such a wonderful emotion. So it can be good for us to do a little bit of an inventory and kind of see, what is it? Like, do I really get joy from my work? And there might be elements of it that really does bring you joy. And to really start to see, okay, what are the qualities of it? What are the qualities? Is it about, you know, learning something new? Like, what is it? Or achieving something that brings me that really good feeling? Maybe the pursuit of money, success, and power don't really bring long-term happiness.
Indeed, and I think your sentiments were echoed in a fascinating article that I came across last week, in fact, in preparation for our chat today, Monique. And I sent you a copy of it too, and I think you were equally impressed by it. It's an article called Money Doesn't Lead to Happiness. For the benefit of our listeners and viewers today, it's a Forbes article. You can download it on the net. She's the CEO of the Stress and Resilience Institute in the USA and does a lot of work with law firms. And in that article, in a nutshell, she was basically saying money doesn't buy you happiness or status or prestige or even external factors like that. But essentially, people appreciate the opportunity to have some degree of autonomy in their jobs as lawyers, a sense of belonging, and that's where relationships and some social interaction, I think, is important in the workplace. And lastly, competence. You know, people want the opportunity to grow, to develop, to become more capable and confident in their work. So her ABC, I think, sits very nicely with what you've been talking about today. Would you agree?
Well, when you know, there was a couple of guys many years ago from Australia that made a documentary. They wanted to go and find where the happiness community was in the world. Do you know where they found that community, Simon?
I don't, but I'm guessing it's in a poor country.
Yeah, in a slum in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And having spent a lot of time living in India, I really understand that. You know, I think that community is one of the most powerful indicators of when someone is going to be thriving and when someone's going to be struggling. And in fact, whenever I have a student who is struggling from depression, one of the first things that I will look at is their social interaction and their connection. And it's vital, it's really important for us to be in community with each other. It's really important. So having spent a lot of time living in India, where what I've seen is that the more developed a country becomes, the more people become separated from each other. When you spend time in a country like India, you have to understand that you are interconnected. There is no, hey, I'm going to do this by myself, which is a little bit more of an American mindset. It's very much, your success is relying on other people within the community. And so it doesn't surprise me to find that the happiest community is in a slum in Mumbai, where there would be a lot of community interaction. I think having spent time in India, we look at a country like that as being incredibly poor, which it is, and there are elements of it that are unbelievably poor. But when you look at the mental poverty in the West, you start to wonder sometimes, which is worse? Is it physical poverty or mental poverty? And I would really probably believe that mental poverty is just absolutely so debilitating for us now, and something we have to deeply address.
Makes me wonder too what the equivalent is in terms of richness and wealth. And those people in Mumbai, by the sounds of it, have it, even though they may not have financial wealth.
Yes,
Monique,
absolutely.
I'm really pleased you could join us today. Our time is unfortunately up, but wait, there's more on the 4th of March. I look forward to hearing the fuller version and having a greater dialogue with you and the rest of the delegates who are going to be in Queenstown on that date. Those listeners and viewers who are interested in this, go to futurefirmforum.com. The information is there for you. But for now, Monique, all the best to you. Thank you for sharing with us your insights and experiences on what makes people happy. I think it's been very timely, and I wish you all the best for the future. Look forward to seeing you after Christmas. Have a good time.
Can't wait for it, Simon. Please let it be a wonderful summer, and everyone stay safe over this time as well.
Great stuff. Well, I'm going to walk the dog now and have a bit of social interaction with the rest of my family. So to everyone watching and listening, all the best, and we'll see you soon. Have a good Christmas, everyone.